So I have another piece of leather underneath, so I can really go into the both layers. And then this awl, I'm gonna have to get a new one. It's kind of old, and this is not gripping as tight. Maybe I can get some Loctite or something like that, or maybe just take a pair of pliers to it. Anyways, the point is I can actually go through both layers, and then I have another awl with a circular point that I make and widen the holes, right? So at each point I'm just going in and I'm just making the holes, and then I take another awl and I widen the holes. And you know, not oftentimes, just to avoid monotony, I'll do like 5 or 10 at a time, and then I'll widen 5 and 10 at a time, and I'll go all the way around. What I don't want to do is go outside of this point, so I'm gonna put a stop point here. So I already know not to go beyond that. Okay, so I know that's just going to be a reminder. Otherwise, it's going to look silly. I mean, it'll work out, but it'll just look silly. Okay, and so that's why we have our buffer here, because now I know I'm going all the way through to the other side. And then I'll just take my other awl that's got the round point, and then I just widen the holes. So it's a tedious process. I mean, if you have, and there are leather sewing machines you can buy at the tune of $1,500. Yes, I've looked into one. There's a certain amount of zen that is involved in this, and a certain amount of, I don't know, you go into your mental space to do this sort of work. It's up to you. It's all in how you want to do it. So those are just some tips. Alright, so I've kind of made the preliminary punches, and as I go through and thread, I just wanted to really illustrate what I'm doing here. The first one I used was flat, this is round, and I use these to actually make the holes bigger throughout the process, which makes stitching bigger, right? So I can punch all the way through to the other side, and then I can make the hole bigger, which makes stitching faster and easier. So I kind of have to do this twice in a way. But like I said, it's kind of one of those things that it's a labor of love. You get through it, and like I said, you put the podcast on or something like that, and before you know it, you're done, right? So that's kind of the next step for this process here is to, and I'm just making holes at the major junctures, because I'm going to do the stitching around the bottle first, and then we're going to, we'll call these wings, alright, or ears, and we'll do the stitching around the ears later. Okay, now one thing I want to mention is way before this point, probably once we had cut out our pieces, you know, this is when you would be doing your engraving and embroidering. And actually this piece, I actually did want to do something kind of cool with this. It may or may not be too late to do so, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. But this is where you would really do the embroidering right here, because my focus is to make sure that this is watertight at the end of the day, because that's the goal. It's a container. So any extra holes, any sort of thing that I was thinking I was going to do, I'm going to save it for next time. I may make another one using the same pattern, but I'll do something different as far as making it look pretty on the front and the back. Apparently there's laser engravers that's pretty cool. That makes stuff work real fast. Not very primitive, but you can do real intricate Celtic knots and different sorts of designs, custom designs, things like that, I think, which is kind of neat. Be a neat little investment for somebody who's really into leather craft and leather work, and it's made a business out of it. But yeah, I could stamp something into this or put some studs in here or whatever. So anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then I'm gonna begin stitching. Alright, a recap of saddle stitching. So I'm working on this side, and I'm gonna work my way around to this side here. So I'm just using wax nylon. There's other types of threads you can get. Wax nylon is working well because we are going to be using some wax later on. So I already started my stitching here, And so all it is I want to take my outside needle, go through the hole that I've already widened, like I mentioned before. And then on the other side, I want to take my other needle and go through the same hole that I just came through from. So it's out. Alright? So you're just kind of doing this kind of motion. That's all saddle stitching is. I'm going to do it one more time, that's it. Got plenty of videos on how to do that, and then I cinch it tight. And I usually use, you know, a couple of sticks so I don't cut my fingers on this this thread, because it will cut you if you're not careful, because it's very strong. So again, I'm going to go through my next hole, pull it through, take my other thread. Other thread is here, and then this is the one thread that we just set down, the one thread that we put through. I'm going to put my needle through that same hole and then pull that through, and that's all it is. Saddle stitching is really easy, and I just pull it tight. So I'm going to be saddle stitching this whole thing together. That's all I'm doing, so you're not missing anything spectacular. If not, just search my channel for it, or search the internet for how to saddle stitch. So here's the finished stitched piece, front and back. I'm going to use this as the front for the most part. And so I'm going to take some sandpaper, but again, this is just refining it, right? Like craftsmanship and that. If this was just a rustic piece, who cares about sanding? You know, you could rub it on a piece of sandstone or whatever. But, you know, for now I'm just going to make sure that the edges are even. I can just take this and just kind of rub the ends together so they melt together and everything's nice and smooth. So that's this next step here. You can be as fastidious about this as you want to. I'm not going to be honest. But yeah, essentially that's the next step, is to sand the edges. And then what I'm going to do, alright, so really the next step outside of sanding is to wet this down and to fill it full of rice, sand, pebbles, rocks. I'm going to use popcorn, okay? And that's going to expand this and fill up the volume here. And then we can also start to size our cork. After that, we will be adding some beeswax, which is the messy part. Now, the beeswax goes on the inside. That's what's going to seal the seams to make this watertight. Okay? And also protect us from, you know, whatever adhesives we use to clamp it together. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stain this first on the outside, not the inside. I'm only going to stain this on the outside with kind of a light brown or brownish. Now, if you're using beeswax, and some of the research that I've done online, some of the resources are using the wax on the outside. I didn't have very good luck with that, to be honest. I do have liquid wax as a sheen or a shine, but the leather itself, especially if you're using rawhide or a stomach, you know, a bovine stomach sack, is watertight anyways, right? So I'm making a kind of a creative / executive decision to not do the outside waxing part. I'm going to just go ahead and stain it. Again, I'm going to provide the resource link below, because that craftsman is much more versed and more crafty than I am in this realm, and that's cool. I'm learning something and I'm regurgitating, and I don't mind. But I also experimented with it, and I'm finding out what works for me based on my tools and the experience that I have. Alright, so here is our flat, shapeless, lifeless canteen, but it's all stitched together. I did dye it with a light brown. It may get a little darker as we go forward. But now it is time to shape it. So how we do that is I'm going to fill this little tray full of water, warm water preferably, and then after filling it with warm water, I'm going to go ahead and just set the whole thing into the water and let it soak for a little bit, probably about 5-10 minutes. It doesn't take very long, but I wanted to get it soaked all the way through so that now the leather becomes extremely pliable. So as you're working it in this state, be mindful not to be working on a rough surface, especially if you're making this like a real artistic piece and you don't want gouges and bumps and bruises and things like that, scrapes and cuts in it, okay? Because using vegetable tan leather can be, you're making it, when you put it in water, it's very moldable. And that's what we want. That's the purpose of this. So I'm going to let this soak for about 5-10 minutes, and then we will start to shape this. Alright, so while while the canteen is soaking, what we're going to do is we're going to work on a strap. I have approximately a 4-foot strap, and this is, you know, about 3/4 of an inch wide. It could be thinner, it could be thicker. It's up to you. You can make it adjustable with all kinds of buckles and doodads. I'm not going to do all that because this fits around my shoulder just fine the way it is. There's all kinds of ways to do this. I'm going to do this the simplest way I found online. And so I'm measuring up about 7 inches. Okay. And then I'm just going to make a mark. Make a little tick mark about 7 inches from the tip. And again, not very heavy tick mark, not the whole barcode gimmick in here. This will come off over time. Get rid of that. And then about 7 inches or so up here. 6.5, 7 inches at least for my body type. Just a little tick mark. And I could totally measure this out. There's all kinds of different ways of doing it. I'm just going to do it quick and dirty. And all I'm going to do is from the 7 inches is I'm cutting in, and I want to make this really thin. Just a thin strip. I'm going to get it down to maybe 1/4 of an inch thick on both sides. And I guess I could use a straight edge, but it's a little harder to do so. With shears, it makes things a little easier. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this out, and then I'll show you the end product. Alright, so we have the strap here, and it's not perfect. You know, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time. I don't mind rustic. You know, perfection is one thing. If I'm making it for somebody else as a gift or something, yeah, I want things to be perfect and perfectly aligned and symmetrical, but I just want it to be functional, right? And a little bit of, it gives it character, alright? So anyways, I went about 7 inches up here, and then just I'm tapering the end because it's got to fit through our hole. Now we're going to make a little slot here once we get to that stage to be able to fit our piece of leather in, and it's going to lock into place, which is actually pretty neat. But before we do that, I'm going to measure in approximately, you know, 1/2 inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch from the tip. Okay, I'm measuring in you may not be able to see it, sorry, I'm off camera. 3/4 of an inch from the tip here, and what I want to do is I want to take my little hole punch here, and I just want to put some notches in there. So one more time, measure twice, cut once, 1/4 of an inch right where my thumb is, and I just want to just nick the sides of it just a little bit. Leather, this type of leather is extremely tough, but I don't want it to go all the way through. Just want to nick the sides of it, and I'm going to go on both sides. Just want to nick the sides of it. I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so you have something that looks like this at the tip, okay? So I'm going to do that on both sides, and then when we get to that stage, I'll show you why we did that. It's actually pretty neat. Here we've got our cask here, leather cask, that should be nice and thoroughly wet now. It's soaking for probably about 10-15 minutes. I'm not going to worry about patting it dry, drying it out. We'll have time for that later. Okay, so I'm putting this in the pan here because we want to fill this up. And again, I mentioned filling it up with sand, rice, I'm using popcorn, beans, fine pebbles would work as well, okay? So the whole point is to fill it up and pack it in, right? So I'm getting another tool here that will help with the process. And so this is the phase where we shape it. So what I want to do here is I got some popcorn here, and I've got a funnel, okay, to help. And again, remember, we didn't close or sew this shut. And that's the reason why. So it's very important at the beginning not to close it shut, because now we got to open this up. Okay, so we're gonna open this up. Take the funnel, kind of shove it in there. All right, and then what we will do, and I don't know if you can see this, and I have this on a pot, so that if I miss anything, the popcorn will just fall in the pot instead of on the floor. All right, so I'm gonna just fill this with the popcorn, and then I'm gonna take my chopstick here. No, again, off camera a little bit, but I'm packing it in. Okay. Okay, so it'll get to the top a little bit, and I'm sorry this is off camera. Let me make some adjustments here. I'm just not trying to make a mess in the kitchen. But as it starts to pack here in the hole, I'm going to take my tool and just pack those kernels in there, and then continue this process. Takes a little bit, but it'll be worth it, trust me. Start packing more in there. And again, put this in here. And that way I can continue to pack these kernels in here and not make a mess. That's the goal. So I'm going to continue doing this until we get some volume in here, but there's already some kernels in here. And then this is like a whole quart. What we're going to try to do is fill this whole thing with this quart of popcorn. Alright, so here is kind of, I want to say, partially filled our our wine flask, or our canteen, or water container, leather water container, and it's still wet. I still want to shape it, but I think I can fill it a little bit more. I think I can really kind of try to stretch this and expand this out. And that whole quart container full of popcorn, I'm out. So I'm gonna run to the store right quick, because popcorn's relatively cheap, and get some more popcorn, because I like popcorn as a filler. I'm able to dry the popcorn out and it still pops. I'll show you about that later. But I'm gonna, while it's still wet and while I have time, I'm going to run to the store right quick, get some more popcorn, put some, fill it some more up, continue to work and shape it till it's the proper shape I want. And then I'm going to take this cork here, I'm going to have to whittle this a little bit so that it fits. It's almost just the right size. I guess I could force it, but I want to taper it down, so I don't have to really scrunch up the leather too much. So I should taper it so it's a nice tight fit. So I'm going to just take my little blade and kind of whittle it down a little bit and make sure this fits. And then I'm going to let this sit overnight and dry with the cork in. I may even have it hang upside down so it's not, so it's bulbous as possible. and then also I can kind of show you how the straps work, because I'll insert the strap, so let it hang upside down, hang it right side up overnight. This is a 2-day process, and then it should be the proper shape, and then we can go ahead and seal it so that it can be watertight. But so far so good. Alright, so I went on ahead and got another thing of popcorn and filled it as much as I can. I could probably even push it even further, but I'm gonna stop here. I think we're doing good. And again, this particular funnel is actually working quite well for these types of projects. And then I already had this pre-made stopper for another project, and this is actually fitting quite well in there. I have some modifications that I still need to do, but I'm going to keep it in there so it doesn't close up on me. I would like it a little longer, and that's okay. I could probably even kind of drop it on his head a little bit to sink it in there a little bit, right? So now it's in there nice and compact, and while the leather is still wet, I can still mold and shape and try to get the form I want out of it, right? And again, this is front, this is the back, quote unquote. And yeah, I think more or less packed it so that this will retain its shape. So yeah, it will retain its shape until it dries. Now, a couple of things. The cork, which is a white wood, nothing wrong with that. Rustic style, leave it as is. I'm going to cut a wedge in here to make a lanyard that's going to attach to our leather strap here, which I want this to dry overnight with that sort of weight on it. And so everything is centered both with the CE and the CI. So all of the weight, the gravity is going to do the work and let it center downward. So we have a big, nice barrel bowl here. All right. And then as I start moving stuff around, I can, you know, whatever shape I don't want it to. Again, working with leather is really kind of fun, actually, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. I don't know. I enjoy it. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm going to dye this with the cork, the wood stopper here, and I don't want to pull it out too much. I'm just going to leave it in there like that until we're ready to deal with it tomorrow. I'm going to dye this with some walnut dye. And again, if you've been on my channel, you know how to make walnut dye. Black walnut dye. I've got plenty of it left over from some years ago, a few years ago, last year, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to dye it so it actually looks real natural. Again, in the bush, I don't care. Doesn't matter. It's going to get bushy anyways. So what we're going to do now is we're going to attach the straps that I have yet to actually stain, but that's okay. We're going to attach the straps so I can hang it up so that all of this weight can go towards the bottom, because it's a rounded piece, so I want all the weight to go to the bottom because all of the corn kernels went down, right? But I want gravity to do the work. Okay, so here we have our piece. It's filled up. I think I could weight it down and fill it up some more, but I'm not going to push it. I have yet to dye the plug, but we're going to set the plug in there, because what's going to happen is this leather is going to set around, it's going to become hard, right? But what I don't want is this sort of like this bottom part to be real wonky or whatever the hell it's wanting to do. And again, it's still malleable at this point, and I can shape and mold. It's like clay. But this is the reason for the strap that we have here. And the strap here, I've already kind of dyed it. As you can see, it's almost the same color. But then we did the strap earlier, and we did it in a particular way. Now, The reason for that is because I want to be able to hang this so that the weight of the popcorn kernels or whatever you're having as a filler, we can let gravity do its work. So I want to be able to hang this. But also I want to show you how this is actually going to work, right? So, I'm going to have to get some tools. Alright, so I have my back black drop. Now I have my cutter, my utility blade, and I have my hole punch. And yeah, I think I have it on the size I want it to be. So ultimately, again, I'm keeping everything because it's still wet and we're still trying to mold it and shape it and all that kind of stuff before it gets hard. Okay? So that's an important aspect of this process. But because it's still wet, this is why we are going to do this. And again, for me, this is front facing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these ends and I'm going to feed it through one of the holes that we talked about. And while it's still malleable, I'm going to still pull it through. Okay? Now, if I had a nice size grommet and all the tools to make a nice grommet, which is the big holes in that, then that would be not a problem. I don't have that, so we're going to have to do something else. So I don't know, I guess right about here where we started, because again we did 7 inches, maybe 6.5, but you know, whatever. Right about here at the base of where this starts to thin out is where we're going to punch a hole. Okay, so we're going to use a smaller hole punch. I'm just going to punch a hole right there in the middle. Okay, now what I want to do with my straight edge is I do want to cut, I'm going to cut some slots. Okay. So I want to just look at this up and down, make sure it's even, and just cut even slots about half. No, that went a little further than I wanted. But I want it to go all the way through. Alright, and then I want to go to the other side. And again, sometimes it helps to have this through. I mean, if I had measured this out, this would be perfect, you know, but you know, what's perfect, right? And I just want a little bit, but I want it all the way through. And the same on both sides. Now the reason why I want this way, and I think it's very poignant, is we create basically a buttonhole. Okay, so this is a buttonhole. So this, and again, notice we cut the notches here. This can go through the little hole. We can open it up, whether it's wet or not. Shape it so it can go through. Yeah, just like that. This one go through. And then you can square away. And now it is cinched as a strap. And then this is what it looks like on the back. Okay, so I thought this was quite clever. I thought it was really nice. I could have measured this better. But rustic is good from my point of view. And again, it is just kind of how you want to do it, right? And then it's the same thing is going to go through this way, because again, this is the back of it. So this is the front of it. So, and that's fine. It doesn't really matter. And we can turn, again, this is the top part of the strap. This is the flush side of the strap. We can turn this around and feed this through the hole that we've created, or grommet. Pull it through, especially when it's wet, right? Because things are more malleable. And we can figure out where it's actually going to fit through. And we're going to try to make it about the same. Alright, we're going to try to make it about the same. And I think that's fair, right? Which means, again, I'm not giving you exact measurements. I'm giving you approximations, right? And that's on you. You know, this is not something that I'm going to try to mass produce. If that be the case, then there has to be real precise measurements, right? So that's the hole. And then I want to create slits up and down. I don't want it too long, like I did before. That was a mistake. Like that. Then I can turn this around. And I can cut down. Now here's something I forgot to do. Wet towel under this polyurethane or even a cardboard thing, just put them underneath there so they don't slide so well. I mean, it's best to lay them flat. Then they're sturdy, they're steady. You don't have to worry about stuff sliding away. Alright? That's just some kitchen lore for you if you don't know. Now you know. And I'm going to do is just make a small slit down the middle. Not too far, but I know what I was trying to do. Alright, always sheathe your blade, right? So, got this open up, at least to the point where I need it open. If I need to open it up some more, my blade, go from one end to the other, and stop it there. Okay, so now I can take this end. As you can see, this is the back end, mind you, or rather, excuse me, this is the front end. This is the front end. And all I want to do is poke this in through the middle. And they're not symmetrical, they're not the same. This one and this one are not the same. So I'm just going to poke them through. They'll go through. I could probably use my teeth, pull stuff through, or wet stuff down. It's all good. But once it gets through, pull, I think by this point you kind of, if you're in the know, you know what's going to happen. Is going to just make a seat, and then I twist it so it makes a seat, and it's not coming out, right? And then as long as it's sitting this way horizontally, it's not coming through. So this is our configuration, which I think is quite ingenious. I think it works quite well. I'm losing some length on this, but that's okay. I could have measured this a little bit more, but you know, as long as we can shape our bell and our flask, we should be doing good. And this is what it looks like on the other side. Either way you choose to do it, I think it's quite rustic and it works quite well, and we can hang it now, and that's the whole purpose, is being able to hang it so that we can let the gravity do the rest of the work while it dries overnight. Alrighty? And then again, while the leather is still wet, we can still kind of shape it the way we want to shape it and massage it the way we want to shape it.